Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to continue our offseason preview series here on the channel. This time, diving into those Toronto Raptors. Now, if you're a big time Raptors fan, comment down below, we the North. I'm going to be leaving the little hearts on all of those comments today. I always appreciate your guys' support. I feel like Raptors fans are some of the most passionate fans across the entire NBA. So thank you for showing up big time for your favorite team today in today's video. And let's jump into that video preview here now, where we're going to start by looking at this most recent season. We'll have a quick season recap. What do I think about this current team? And of course, having a good feel for where this team currently is gives us a better picture going into this offseason of what they should look to do, could look to do, and some of the prerogatives for this front office and Masai Ujiri to target improvement-wise going into next year. We'll also talk about the NBA draft. Of course, this is a great time for Raptors fans talking about draft prospects, who they want to land in the draft, possible trades. There's so much to talk about in this video from both the trade and draft perspectives for Toronto. We're also going to spend a bit of time on free agency. Now, a little bit of a precursor here. I don't think the Raptors are going to be huge players in free agency. We'll discuss why very shortly here. But it's still worth mentioning what their free agency situation looks like so that everyone has a good idea of what their cap table currently presents to be. Their unrestricted free agents, specifically Chris Boucher, who we'll talk about in this video. And then at the end of the video, we'll also give my early outlook for next season. What do I think is a realistic expectation for this team? How many wins could this team put together? Are they a potential playoff team? Again, I hope you guys do enjoy the video today. By the way, if you do, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And let's jump into it here now with that season recap. It was a down year for the Raptors for sure, all things considered. 30-52 record, definitely not good enough for Toronto Raptors standards. They finished 11th in the Eastern Conference, missed the play-in altogether, missed the playoffs, of course, completely as well. They did deal with a ton of injuries, so there are for sure some Raptors fans who are going to be saying, well, this wasn't really our team. We were injured, missed a lot of time, the starting lineup really never got to play together. And then remember at the deadline, they made a big trade for Brandon Ingram as well, who has yet to make his Toronto Raptors debut. So there's already a lot of optimism going into next year if this team is healthy, if the starting five can all play together, if they can be on the court at the same time, how much better this team can be. And I think Ingram's going to be a core piece to that. Because looking at this team's offense this past year, they were just, quite frankly, not good enough. I had the luxury to watch this team in person a few times this past year, of course, watched them on League Pass a ton as well. Their offense was pretty stale. 110.5 team offensive rating, ranked just 25th in the NBA, which is around the bottom five, just outside of it actually, with the 6th worst offense by team offensive rating in the NBA. And I think with that, there's a few things that we're obviously missing in terms of pull-up shot making. That's something that Brandon Ingram's, of course, going to be able to bring. That's also something where you have Jamison Battle playing 30 minutes a night. You have Jonathan Mogbo playing big minutes as a rookie. Your team is going to be held back a little bit offensively, just from a personnel standpoint with who was missing time, which guys they did and didn't have available regularly. And of course, the Ingram addition especially is going to help their team offense going into next year, you'd have to think. Their team defense, though, that's really the bread and butter silver lining from this past year, especially as the season carried on. The final 30, 40 games of the season or so, second half of the year, the Raptors defense just kept getting a little bit better and a little bit better. They started putting some really nice stuff together toward the end of the year, even winning quite a few games down the stretch. And you know, some Raptors fans were disappointed with that because it did kind of adjust their lottery odds a little bit with their solid play down the stretch of the season. But I do think when it comes to momentum year to year, while it's not the most obvious thing, it's not something you can just tangibly grab onto, harness, and start winning because of. I do think that experience, especially for a young roster with still a relatively young NBA head coach who doesn't have a lot of time under his belt as an NBA head coach, I think those things are very beneficial for this team going into next year, figuring out, okay, well, this worked, this didn't, what can we build on? And I think that's a really, really great starting point for this team going into this upcoming season. Scottie Barnes, productive year once again. Now, the efficiency wasn't where you want it to be for a franchise type of player. That, of course, is going to be an area of continued development and improvement for Scottie going forward. Now, I'm still a huge Scottie Barnes believer. If you go back to all my pre-draft evaluation on him, the night the Raptors took him, and I gave them an A+ grade with that selection, Scottie Barnes has lived up to a lot of what my expectations were for him coming out of Florida State. And I know Raptors fans do really gravitate toward him because he had a very, very strong defensive campaign, put together some really great defensive moments, averaged over a block per game, averaged over a steal per game, was extremely productive in those regards. Now, the three-point shot is going to continue being one of the big questions for him. Shot sub 30% from three this past year. And while there's the comparisons to Giannis Light, some people even compare him to Ben Simmons, which I think is a little misguided. I do think what we know now, Scottie Barnes is not a point guard. Scottie Barnes is not a primary lead ball handler. I do think his development in those areas and the opportunities Toronto has given him over the last few years to have the ball a lot and play with the basketball is good for his development and good for future playoff reps and future playoff opportunities for him. Comfortability with the basketball is extremely important for everyone on your roster. Scottie Barnes, of course, is going to still be a cornerstone pillar, but I do think for Toronto, part of their offensive kind of deficiencies at times too came from the lack of dynamism from their shot creation and on-ball play. And I do think Scottie Barnes, while he's a very good player and someone who I like a lot, I don't think he's a lead go-to guy. And I do think if they got a true lead point guard there, someone who's a shade better than Emmanuel Quickley, it could really escalate their offense quickly, putting Barnes kind of into a more play finisher and connective type of role rather than a lead go-to guy. And I do think Ingram's going to have some positive impact there as well. RJ Barrett led the team in scoring this year, over 20 points per game for him. Pretty efficient year, all things considered. Now, I'm kind of interested to hear what you guys have to say about RJ Barrett. Where's the fan base with him? Do you guys want to keep him long term? Is he a guy you would be okay with the Raptors trading? I really don't have a great feel for how the Raptors fan base internally feels about RJ. Now, for me specifically, while I do think RJ Barrett's a good stopgap player for them, I don't think he's necessarily a key piece for the Raptors long term. Now, if they can ultimately reinvigorate this roster around Scottie and RJ and it ends up being those two guys on the wings for them going forward, I don't have immediate distaste toward that. But you have to have the right kind of pieces there, and I do think Toronto's still a step or two away from having those kinds of players. Pirtle, really solid center, of course, dealt with some injuries, missed some time, but when he's on the court, he's very, very valuable. Good drop coverage big. Protects the rim, screens well, just does a lot of little things right. There's a reason the Raptors traded for him when they did. Now, it hasn't really quite worked out for them. They haven't been competitive after that move as much, but I don't really think that's an indicator of Jakob Poeltl. I think that's more so kind of doubling down on what I've talked about with this team and how they are still a piece or two away from being a really great elite competitive team. Again, kind of sound like a broken record here, but Brandon Ingram should hopefully help this team take a step forward offensively and kind of maximizing Pirtle's screen setting and rolling a bit as well. Grady Dick, I thought, had a really good season for himself. I thought took a pretty meaningful stride forward this past year. I think he just felt more comfortable on the court, and I think you could tell that. One of the games I got to watch him in person, I showed up about 2 hours early, watched him work out, spent quite a bit of time, watching him shoot the basketball, and that stroke is as pure as ever. And I loved Grady Dick coming out of Kansas as a prospect. I thought there was a lot of value for a team to draft him and fit him into their offense. I do think Grady Dick will still be a really nice long-term piece for this Raptors team. Emmanuel Quickley, the pull-up shooting is still legit. Again, this is part of the issue with Toronto. They have good players. Are they good enough players? Is Emmanuel Quickley a top 60, 70 player in the world? Probably not. And with that being the case, having the ball in his hands quite frequently, you might be capping how good your overall team can be because you're using suboptimal go-to players. And I do think for Toronto, and this is something we'll talk about later in the video, they are kind of slated to make a big move, some kind of big splash, and an upgrade over an RJ Barrett, an upgrade over Emmanuel Quickley could drastically change the way we view this team because they already have a lot of the depth in place. They already have a lot of the nice ancillary pieces there. It's just about upgrading into the starting five at some point, in my opinion. Ochai Agbaji, really, really good rookie season. Bounce back season for him, and first full season in Toronto. Of course, they acquired him from Utah last year. And I do think Agbaji specifically, a guy who, former lottery pick, got traded by Cleveland to Utah, then got traded now from Utah to Toronto. He's bounced around a lot. I think he's starting to really find a home here in Toronto. I know Raptors fans have fully embraced him. And with the season he just had, very efficient on threes. That's really the biggest thing you knew you were going to get out of Agbaji coming in from his college career, was that he could really shoot the basketball. I do think Toronto is the home for Ochai Agbaji moving forward. Jacoby Walter, another, I think, long-term integral piece for this team's future. I really love the amount of shooting they'll have either off the bench or into their rotation, depending on how they shake up the starting lineup throughout the course of the next couple of years. But Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, Ochai Agbaji can all really shoot the ball at a high level. I love that they have those three players kind of in their rotation moving forward to help surround this team with shooting. And I think as Dick, Walter, and Agbaji continue growing, developing their games a little bit, getting a little bit more comfortable attacking closeouts, and just functionally fitting into a team offense a little bit better in the half court, these three are going to be an integral long-term core pieces for them from a depth perspective. And then Jamal Shead, I really loved him as a second-round pick last year. I had a first-round grade on him in his draft class. And I thought, with the rookie season he had, well, yes, there are still some limitations. Of course, scoring the basketball is not going to be his bread and butter in the league. You got to see his defensive value, I thought, firsthand this year with Toronto. So, all things considered, the Raptors didn't have a good team season. Their offense was really, really putrid. But there's a lot to believe in going forward with this team, and I think that's why a lot of Raptors fans are so optimistic about this team's future. So when it comes to their NBA free agency situation, usually I do the draft and then talk about trades and then talk about free agency. I wanted to split it up a little bit this time and actually begin with free agency in this discussion in this offseason preview, because this is kind of the bottom dollar, bottom line for Toronto. This understanding of free agency is really important to get what's going to happen with the Raptors this offseason. They have $181.647 million of active contracts on their roster. They also have a significant number of cap holds, $37.164 million cap hold collection going into this offseason. Now, that number is a little misleading. Chris Boucher, his cap hold is $20.5 million, which is crazy for Chris Boucher. He will not make that much money. Raptors fans know that. Everyone across the NBA knows that. Chris Boucher will not make $20 million next year. Let's say that Toronto gets him back on like a 2-year $16 million deal, right? $7 to $8 million annually, something kind of in the wheelhouse, a little bit more than the tax mid-level maybe for Boucher. All of a sudden you're looking at the contracts and you're saying, okay, well, they don't have $37 million of cap holds at that point. It's down to about $17 million, and that's really not too drastic. But even with Boucher on a cheaper number, this team is very, very, very likely either on the absolute cusp of the tax line. At the very minimum, they are like literally bordering the tax, or more than likely they're above the tax and even bordering that first apron where they're about $6-7 million over the tax. And at that point, for Toronto, a team that right now we're not sure if they're going to be a true contender in the East. Now, of course, they have ways to shake up this roster and get a lot better very quickly, but in the event that they don't, this team is really expensive for a team that's probably not going to win 50 games. And this is one of my concerns. When they did trade for Brandon Ingram, some of you Raptors fans who are watching, then you probably can remember, I was not the biggest believer in Brandon Ingram as a trade candidate for the Raptors. And the reason for that was this exact issue. The roster is really expensive right now, and while they got Brandon Ingram trade value-wise for pennies on the dollar, his contract was dollars on the dollar, and it was a lot of dollars in that contract, and their starting five is going to cost about $155.3 million this upcoming season. That is a very, very spendy starting five, especially for a team that, again, are we sold that this team's going to win 50 games next year? I would have to bet against that. So when you're looking at spending this much money, now one of the best things for Toronto is they have a lot of young pieces yet. Grady Dick on a rookie deal, Jacoby Walter on a rookie deal. Ochai Agbaji is going into the final year of his rookie contract before his restricted free agency status next year. The Raptors do have some really affordable depth pieces that kind of help insulate this roster right now. But as some of those young players become extension eligible, and instead of making $6 million, maybe they're making $11, $12 million. Every single dollar, especially in the new CBA, really matters. And you're seeing how restricted Toronto might be long-term if they don't make some kind of big, massive shakeup with this roster, which is why I wasn't super huge on the Brandon Ingram trade. And right now, just being completely transparent, there's almost no way Toronto's super active in free agency unless that's a significant sign and trade. And if that's the case, then I need to know what player's going out. Is it Quickly? Is it Barrett? Is it Ingram somehow without even ever playing for the Raptors? Surely it wouldn't be Scottie Barnes in some kind of sign and trade this offseason. So very likely the Raptors just flat out are not signing, notable free agents this offseason. They're probably going to be kind of cut down to just minimum contracts that they bring in this offseason in free agency. But they have other ways of improving, of course, and that starts with the NBA draft. This is Toronto's best opportunity to improve their team with what they currently have, right? They have pick number 9 and pick number 39 in this draft. 1 first-round pick, 1 second-round pick, and with those selections, there's a few guys I could see them targeting. We could look at some big men. Kamen Maluach probably won't be available at pick number 9. Now, big men typically do get a little underdrafted on draft night. We saw it with Derek Lively, who fell down to pick number 12. We saw it with Alperen Şengün in his draft. He fell out of the lottery completely. Bigs tend to get underdrafted. I don't understand quite why. Bigs are extremely valuable in the NBA. When you have good ones, it really promotes and propels your team toward winning. But in the event that maybe Maluach does fall to pick 9, he would be tremendous for Toronto. I have raved and raved and raved about the value of his screen setting, his rim gravity, his size at the rim. And I do think his defensive versatility with his athletic tools and length and sheer size, hand size, wingspan, standing reach, all of that stuff would be very, very valuable for the Raptors. And they already have good insulation defensively around him and another big man to kind of spell his minutes and not require Maluach to play 30 minutes a night, which is what I think makes Toronto such an attractive landing spot for someone like Kamen Maluach. But in the event that Maluach is off the board, someone like Derek Queen gives them just a different kind of big, someone who can probably coexist next to Jakob Poeltl in your starting lineup and gives you a 4-man. Now, there's a little bit of overlap here with Scottie Barnes, which I think would be a little problematic in terms of maximizing Derek Queen's game early in his career, but I do think Queen's ability to process the court as a short roller, I have a big belief in his touch and a scoring skill set. I think his footwork is tremendous. For me, I'm very much a believer in Derek Queen. I actually have him ranked 3rd on my big board at this point of the process, and I do think for Toronto at 9, with rumors that they brought him in to work him out privately, Queen in Toronto would be a very, very good fit long-term because I do think he can become a build-around piece. Otherwise, there's a variety of other players. Yegor Demon, not someone I have listed on the graphic here, but of course, he's drawing some top 10 buzz right now. Kasparis Jakučionis, while he's a little turnover prone, I don't know how much he's going to advance Toronto's offense immediately, but he does give them another ball handler, another guy who can engage drop defenders. You could look at 2 defensive options, Carter Bryant, Noah Senge, both of them trajectory-wise kind of project to be very good NBA defenders at some point. Senge kind of a fluid, rangy backline defender, and Carter Bryant, someone who I think could have some real success at the point of attack. At pick number 39, if the Raptors do trade out to 9 as well, by the way, they could grab 2 prospects in the first round this year. We'll talk about some of those trade possibilities down the road here, but pick 39, Ryan Kalkbrenner, another guy who could fit in as a big man for them. If they decide to go guard or wing at number 9, they could come back and find a big at 39 for sure. Otherwise, you look at some shooting. Kobe Bray out of Kentucky, I think the best shooter in this year's draft. Alex Tui, someone who wins with his effort but can also shoot the ball a bit, play off the catch respectably well, coming over from the NBL, Sydney Kings. Sion James, I think, would be a really great pick for Toronto, someone who can really guard. I think at the heart of his game, comparison-wise, you're going to look at another Terrence Mann type of player where he comes in and does a lot of the dirty work, fits a team well, plays within himself, plays his style of game, and that promotes winning. And I think Sion James is a guy who he's going to probably go in the second round, but he might return first-round value in this year's draft. Vlad Golden, big man out of Michigan. Now he's older, kind of a more retro prospect. He's a back-to-the-basket, inside bruiser, finisher, kind of slow-footed. This is a guy who at 39 might be a little bit of a reach, but I thought would be an interesting backup big man option while the Raptors are still waiting for Ulrich Chomchi to continue developing and really break into his mold of player. Ryan Nembhard, another guy who could, I think, help this Toronto offense a bit, giving them another ball handler, someone who's very ball secure, very high assist to turnover rate this past year for Gonzaga. Of course, his brother's lighting it up for the Indiana Pacers in the NBA Finals right now. So Ryan Nembhard would not be a bad choice at all in the second round at number 39 if you're Toronto. So sliding forward here into some of those trade possibilities. We've outlined some draft prospects. We talked about how free agency is not going to be the bread and butter for Toronto this offseason. Now, trade possibilities, this may or may not happen, but I do think it was very important to include in this video because they could still possibly land a big fish. That's kind of been the key phrase I've heard around Raptors Twitter this offseason, a big fish. And that's what the Raptors are really waiting for. And in my evaluation of the team as well, that's what they're really lacking. They have a lot of good pieces. They don't have a top 25, a top 35 player on their roster. And when you don't have that, even if you have a lot of talent, if you have a good coach, you have a lot of skill, it's very, very hard to win at a super high level in the NBA because of the consistency that a true superstar brings. Someone like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, someone like a Trae Young just brings so much offensive consistency to your roster that it's hard to replace that kind of player. And could Toronto go out and strike for someone like that? Could they maybe take a budget approach and look at someone like LaMelo Ball, for example, this offseason? Otherwise, another trade possibility I want to talk about is them maybe trading down in the draft. I have a couple of examples of that in this video to talk about as well. And then an example that I really don't have in this video is roster reconfiguration. I talked about maybe finding ways to shave money or kind of adjust this starting lineup. What if Toronto internally is saying, yeah, we're not sure if RJ Barrett's the guy we want going forward, or what if it's not Emmanuel Quickly long-term next to Brandon Ingram? What if we want this kind of player? Maybe a Drew Holiday, get in on a Kristaps Porzingis right now, right? There's players in Boston who might become available. The league is at a real inflection point, I think, with some teams with high payrolls trying to shake it up. Phoenix with Durant. You look at Boston with Porzingis, Drew, Jaylen Brown maybe even. Are the Raptors kind of in a spot where, with a little reconfiguration, could they kind of change the way this team plays a little bit, improve their offense organically like that by making just a smart, savvy trade that adjusts their team just a little bit? Now, I don't have examples of that in this video, but I thought it was an interesting point that I wanted to mention because if Toronto does go that way, while it might not completely overhaul their roster, it could change, the way that their offense flows in 5-out, or the way that their team works in transition, or the way that their team's able to defend ball screens. Like, there's little things you can improve every single year, and if Toronto kind of finds that right piece, someone like a Drew Holiday or like a Porzingis who could stretch the floor for them as a 5, it might drastically change the way we view this team going into next year, and I thought it was an interesting point to mention. So let's look at trade framework number 1. I have 4 trade frameworks I want to talk about in this video. This first one here brings Giannis to Toronto as well as Bobby Portis. So the Raptors would get a revolutionized front court here. Next to Jakob Poeltl, you bring in the Greek Freak, who would be the best Toronto Raptors since Kawhi Leonard in 2019 when the Raptors, of course, hoisted the Larry O'Brien trophy. Bobby Portis comes in as that kind of third big off the bench, the exact same role he's been thriving in Milwaukee over the last 3 or 4 years here. And then the Bucks in return. Now, this is a very hefty price for the Raptors to pay, and I would understand if Raptors fans aren't thrilled with this kind of package, but it starts with Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett. You trade those 2 salaries out together, and in addition, you send pick 9, you send a first in 2027, a first in 2029, and a lottery-protected first in 2031. And I already can tell Raptors fans are going to be typing saying, we're not giving up all that for Giannis Antetokounmpo. I get it. You guys love Scotty Barnes. I like Scotty Barnes a lot too. RJ Barrett's a good player, can score the basketball. This has a huge winning impact difference for Toronto. A team with Brandon Ingram, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Emmanuel Quickly, Jakob Poeltl. You still have Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shet. I mean, there's a lot of depth still on this team, and trading 2 of your bigger contracts in Scotty and Barrett, while it does kind of hurt to give up some of those young core pillar pieces for your team moving forward, Giannis Antetokounmpo is so darn good that he might be worth this, and it would change the way this Raptors team plays. But you go from a very fun young team with some upside pieces to a team that's ready to compete right now. And it might not be worth giving up all this, but with how the East looks relatively open going forward, Boston's out for a year, seemingly with Jason Tatum injured. We don't know what's going to happen going into this offseason with some of the other markets that are hungry for star talent, like Brooklyn, for example. But I think all things considered, Indiana, while Indiana's a very, very good team, I think Toronto would look at themselves with Giannis and say, we're pretty athletic. We can shoot the ball relatively well. We've got guys who can score in the half court like an Ingram. We've got size with Poeltl and Giannis and Bobby Portis. They could talk themselves into trying to match up pretty well with Indiana. Now, I still think it would be an uphill battle for them, But if you are going to go and swing for the fences for someone like Giannis, you're going to have to pay a pretty penny. And I do think Scottie Barnes would be the best young piece Milwaukee could realistically expect back in a trade for Giannis, and getting this kind of package would really help the Bucks. And meanwhile, I think the Raptors would become low-key contenders in the Eastern Conference. We also look at trade framework number 2 here, one that brings Trae Young and some depth pieces to Toronto for the contracts of Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, pick number 9, and an unprotected 2027 first. The hard thing here, to convince Atlanta to trade Trae Young, you're going to have to give up some solid pieces here because the Hawks do not have their immediate future draft picks. Remember, they owe assets out to San Antonio from the original DeJounte Murray trade. So as a result, the Hawks are looking to stay competitive. And as you can tell here for the Raptors, I do kind of like the packaging of 2 of their starters for a key improvement. I talked about it with Barrett and Barnes for Giannis. Now we're looking at it with Barrett and Quickley for Trae Young. Trae Young was top 2 in the league in points responsible for per game. Him and Nikola Jokic have been the primary leaders of that statistic over the last 2-3 years. And Trae Young, I think, one of the most underrated players in the entire league. Well, he does come with his own host of flaws and deficiencies, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Toronto, with Scottie Barnes there, with Jakob Poeltl, with that team defense that they built, a very solid system in place, I think that they could really insulate Trae Young well. And in this deal, you're also getting back George Niang, another very good off-the-catch player, someone who has done nothing but win a lot in his NBA career as a rotation player for good teams back when he was with Utah, when he was with Cleveland, and of course his stop in Philadelphia, he found quite a bit of success too as a winner. I do think for Toronto, you go into next year, you have enough shooting around Trae to really surround him and build a good team offense. And I think this would put Scottie Barnes into that kind of Jalen Johnson role we've seen the Hawks find so much success with, using him as a screen and dive player, hit him on the short roll, get him the ball in the middle of the floor, and then a lot of his ball skills really come to life in those opportunities, as well as some drawn up pick and roll action. And I do think for Toronto, you could kind of steal that homework and kind of copy the answers there and put Scottie Barnes in a very, very good success trajectory going into his first year with Trae Young, with enough shooting around him and enough talent, with Trae and Brandon Ingram being some of those offensive uplifters there. For the Hawks, I mean, you're getting pick 9, you already have pick 13, you already have pick 22. I do think Quickly, Barrett helped that offense enough there in Atlanta. They'd be a very deep team. They'd have 2 lottery picks in this year as well to kind of help their future going forward. I do think it's an actually fairly balanced trade, one that I do favor for Toronto because I just think Trae Young is far and away the best player in this deal, but I wouldn't hate it at all for Atlanta. We're going to stay on the topic of the Atlanta Hawks working with Toronto here, though, and it's a trade-up package. Atlanta has picks 13 and 22 in this draft. And if Toronto gets to pick number 9 and maybe their top 2 or 3 options that they were really hoping for aren't there, if they've already gone at that spot, maybe Brooklyn at 8 or New Orleans at 7, maybe some of those teams right in front of Toronto snatch up the guys that Toronto was looking for, one of the best ways for them to save money and still improve the depth on this team is moving back down a few spots. Save a little bit of money on this rookie contract, moving from number 9 to number 13, and you also get another stab in the first round with pick 22. And you get a future far out second round pick, which gives you just a little bit of added trade flexibility. So, hey, maybe instead of at 9, instead of taking someone like Derek Queen, who could be there at 13 anyway, by the way, maybe you come away with someone like Thomas Sorber at 13, and at 22 you take a stab at a Adu Thiero, someone who I know myself and a lot of others seemingly are very high on in this process. There's a lot of options for Toronto, and if they do ultimately move down from 9 to 13 and 22, it gives you a couple stabs at the apple, so to speak, and it also gives you maybe a far out future asset just to add into your piggy bank and reservoirs for future trades. Or you could look at another kind of move out trade where you trade back with a team like Washington, for example, and the Wizards, who already have pick number 6, maybe they want another crack in the top 10. They'll, in this trade, give you number 18, number 40. This, again, helps the Raptors save some immediate money right now with how expensive their starting 5 is. While, yes, you do move down 9 spots in this first round, which is a pretty significant move down, you get another grab in the second round. They have pick number 39 already. You get number 40 as well. You're going to add to your rotation, especially on the fringes of it, with some cheap either two-way or second-round contract type players. And the key element to this, you get a far out future first. This is the second most favorable of Boston, Milwaukee, or Portland. That could be a nice asset down the road. Of course, Portland is kind of on the upswing with some of their pieces, but Milwaukee is trending downward long-term seemingly. We don't know what's going to happen with Boston. They're kind of the guinea pig right now with the second apron, CBA, and all of the ramifications of an expensive roster. So the second most favorable in 2029 of those three teams might be a pretty good asset. It gives Toronto more trade flexibility down the road, and it's a far out asset that allows you to kind of weigh your options for a while still getting a first round pick this year, an additional second round pick this year, and more draft control down the road. And of course, for Washington, the answer here, the reason to do this is very obvious. You get a second swing in the top 10. Maybe they walk out with someone like Con Knippel and Derek Queen. Maybe they walk out somewhere in the middle, right, with Carter Bryant and Kamen Maluach, right? The Wizards would have a lot of flexibility here. They could figure some things out at number 6 and 9, respectively. But Toronto, of course, would walk away with future draft control assets and some long-term value to extract from a potential move-down trade like this one. So when it comes to next season, what do I really expect for this team? What's realistic? Well, first of all, they're going to be much better than they were this past year. I feel very, very confident saying that. The East is a little bit more open. I talked about Boston's injuries. There's a lot of questions about who's going to be trying to compete at a high level next year. I think anywhere from 38 to 41 wins is very, very realistic, something I'm very confident in betting on. Now, if they make a big trade for a Trae Young, if they make a big trade for a Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think this team could be much, much better than that even. If they trade for Giannis, they could be a 50, 55 win team. If they trade for Trae Young, they could be a 45-ish win team. I think this team is for sure a sneaky playoff team. I think they're going to be right in that conversation, somewhere between the 9 and 7 seed in the Eastern Conference probably next year. I do think Scotty Barnes hopefully going to have a more efficient season. And depending on what they do with the fringes of this roster, they're going to be able to guard. They're going to be able to get up and down the court. I hope to see their pace increase. And I think with the ball movement that's in place there, they're definitely going to be taking strides forward scoring the basketball. And I'm hoping Brandon Ingram can bring a bit of stability into their half-court offense when things get tough, when the going gets tough. Hopefully Brandon Ingram brings like a nice little scoring presence to this team on his pull-up mid-range jump shots that I do think can help the Raptors a bit going into this next year. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you guys did enjoy. Don't forget to comment "We the North" down below if you did enjoy the video. Also leave a like and subscribe. Thanks again so much. Raptors fans really appreciate you guys, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.